So this is 2 Corinthians 3, the scripture for the 30th of March. Now, in this chapter, Paul draws on some contextual ideas that probably made sense to the people of the time. He discusses letters of recommendation, he discusses the law, he discusses the face of Moses. And of these three, I think the one that's maybe easiest for us to wrap our heads around are letters of recommendation. You see, if you or someone you're close to has recently applied for college or for a job somewhere or for some sort of grad school, you've probably had to offer some letters of recommendation or a reference or something. This is a person that is designed to tell whatever you're applying for that, hey, the credentials that you're showing them actually hold some water here. While grades and test scores are something in terms of getting into a good college, they pale in comparison so frequently to a really good letter of recommendation. It was similar in Paul's time, and people would take their credentials with them so that they wouldn't need to write somebody and wait on the travel time to get a letter of rec. They'd be able to, in taking these credentials with them, they'd be able to demonstrate to others, hey, look, this person who is a mutual acquaintance of ours, both of us, says I'm trustworthy. But instead of carrying around letters of recommendation or asking for those, Paul trusts the community's maturity here in Corinth to the point that he can say that their very existence is a letter of recommendation to him. And this allows him also, in terms of his argument, to pivot, to segue into talking about the difference between writing a letter with ink versus engraving a letter on your heart with the pen of the Spirit, as it were. The idea of God's Spirit's writing on human hearts is important to Paul. It allows him to discuss the letter of the law versus the Spirit of Christ. See, Paul tends to argue in this way, where he'll talk about a lesser thing, and if something is important enough, a lesser thing is important enough to honor it to this capacity, well, then a greater thing, you're going to honor it at least in that capacity, since if you want to honor the lesser thing here, you'll have to honor the greater thing maybe even more. And so that's it's sort of like if you were to host the mayor of your town for a special breakfast or something, how much more would you blow out the house if the president came by? If the law made Moses' face shine, as it says in Exodus 34, 29 through 35, how much more should the Spirit cause us, who've received the Spirit, to shine the Spirit's glory to others? I mean, if the law is glorious and the Spirit, the gospel is even more glorious, well, there should be just as much shining going on. There should be just as much display of glory. So in Exodus, when Moses' face was all shiny, the Israelites, the people Moses was leading, asked him to cover his face with a veil. And Paul runs with this, and he plays with it metaphorically. So there was a big veil, a big curtain that separated the Holy of Holies, or the most holy place in the Jewish temple, from the rest of the Jewish temple. The most holy place was where God lived, and human beings couldn't come except the great high priest but once a year. And humans would come to the temple and come to all the other places, but that central location belonged to God, and there was a curtain that cordoned it off from the rest of the temple. Jesus, when he died, and you can read about this in Matthew 27, specifically verse 51, Jesus, when he died, the people who were watching the temple observed the curtain being torn in two, and this was a huge curtain. It was 6 inches in width, let alone the length. It was a hefty curtain. And so just as our veils are removed when we are ministers of the gospel instead of ministers of the law, so too does God not see fit to veil anymore. God is at work among the world. The curtain that separated the place of God from the place of the people has been torn, because in Jesus Christ, God came and joined us and he restored the unity there, that God walks among us, and so God's Spirit can come among us as well. This frees us from traditions that are no longer effective, no longer necessary, and allows us truly to experience God's glory. I wonder, when have you elevated the letter of the law over and above the spirit of the law? That's all for 2 Corinthians chapter 3. Tomorrow, March 31st, we'll look at 2 Corinthians chapter 4. May God bless you in your reading of Scripture.